I don't know if you can, like, by percentage, what the rate of incidents or things the police have to respond to. How much does it go up on a 4th of July or a New Year's Eve versus a regular day?
New Year's Eve. I would work New Year's Eve for a lot of my career because you have to work New Year's Eve. And when it was 11:58, we had to go find a viaduct to hide under because you know what morons like to do?
Bullets.
Shoot their guns in the air. Happy New Year. And what goes up must come down.
Nothing
and so you
like starting the new year, going to prison, going to jail for murdering someone. I mean, there's
and
nothing
the
like
and
it.
the drunk driving, and I mean so that's why I do not leave my house, because to me it's amateur hour. I do not leave my house on these holidays.
The Hollow Bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast. I'm Kristen Zeman here with my clever and charismatic co-host Sylvia. Talk about pulling that one right out of my ass. We are former police chiefs who have seen a lot of examples of leadership, both the kind that fills the room with substance and the kind that is all shine and no depth. And that is what the Hollow Bunny is about. It is our metaphor for those leaders who look the part but lack the core, the empty suits of this world. And today we're talking about leadership that is built on courage, competence, and character. But this is not just for cops. No, it is not. It's for anyone looking to lead with impact, challenge the status quo, and fill their own bunny with something meaningful. So, Sylvia, let's talk about leadership, because that is literally the essence of this podcast. More specifically, do you think leaders are born or made?
Both. I mean, here we are in close proximity to our nation's birthday, 4th of July, our 250th. So we're examining history, and we're reflecting on history, and we're examining leadership, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a real argument to be made that there are some inherent traits that one has that makes them fit to be a leader, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm going to say more nurture.
Okay, right. Okay. So there are theories, and this is why I loved this context of the anniversary of the United States of America and the evolution of the US, because along with that evolution has come an evolution of leadership theories, which I find super interesting. You and I both are students of leadership, and there are throughout the years, there have been, in fact, one of the very first ones was called the trait theory. And that's exactly what we're talking about.
Born leader.
Carlisle and Galton, which suggests that the idea that greatness is innate and traceable. And this is the founding myth of leadership, which is what's also called the great man theory of history. And it basically describes that as a singular, indispensable, irreplaceable leader. Like, you're just born. And people used to think like Washington was this kind of historical leader. He was offered the chance to become king and he refused it. And so, but the idea is that these people are born. And I find that interesting that's how the original theory, came to be.
Right. And it was believed that it was those traits that one was born with that really ruled the day. And then you brought to light that in 1948, Stodgdale, I think that's how you pronounce his name, examined 100 different studies and found that there was no one single trait that ruled the day that predicted or described someone that became a leader. And don't you remember in undergrad buying that big old thick book, whichever edition it was, that was the landmark book that really cast us into this space that said, okay, it's not just a single trait. It's not prevailing traits. There are things that certainly would get someone into a space where they could lead, but it is nurture that really rules the day. And I think
Yeah.
he really rocked kind of that space and said, look, I've looked at 100 different studies, and there is not a predominant trait that predicts that someone will be a leader.
I found it interesting too in this original trait theory that it was assumed that greatness runs in the blood. Basically back to that
Mm,
monarchy, that king's notion of like, so then the king has a child, and though that child then thus must be the leader as well. And boy, I mean, we see in present day that couldn't be further from the truth. Is just because someone is the spawn of someone else that it makes them an impeccable leader. So I found that very
yeah.
interesting
How's
that
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 go?
was the. It's just so interesting to me that is genuinely what people believed to be true at that time. That great man theory was also, based on blood. Fascinating to me.
Yeah, and then it was what 7 years later that Katz came in with the study that you brought to us in 1955 that said, "Look, leadership is three learnable skills." But I want to pick that apart because I think there are some people that have traits. They have kind of this. Can we call it personality? Can we?
Yeah, let's call it
Traits.
personality. Sure.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
call it personality or trait that makes
Okay.
them connect with people. And connection and human connection is absolutely important as a leader. And if we argue that connection with people and relatability is essential as a leader, then there is some argument that there's some trait, there's some nature that goes with that. But we've also picked apart this thing that you can learn skills and there is some part of leadership that is performative. What do you say about that, particularly when assessing folks for either entry into your organization or promotion within?
So I find this fascinating because the built leader, it's genuinely what I subscribe to, is that anyone can learn to lead. And I've often said that when we get a young cop that comes into our profession, what I want from them is exactly what you're describing. Is I want them to have a character integrity. I want them to have principles and virtues, and we can teach the rest. We can teach the technical skills. We can teach defensive tactics. We can teach them the law and how to apply it. But that technical skill is interesting though, because what we did is we took that too far. That skills theory by Katz is basically what we hung our hat on, especially in policing when it came to promotion. So people would promote based on their test scores. Here, take this test. And if you've got that skill, then you can go forth and become promoted and become a leader. And as you and I both know, just because someone has the technical or operational skill does not mean that they are going to be a good leader. And Eisenhower's quote was very powerful. And he said, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it. And that is interesting because that is a pure skills theory framing, but there's also a tinge of leadership there. Is that when you move people to do something, you have to be well, no, that's a whole other conversation because an autocratic leader also could have the same result, right? But
Maybe, sure.
yeah, yeah. So I think that that's what this era, and by the way, this era, look, think of the year. It was 1955. So that was post World War II when America was first treating leadership as something that you trained at scale, like, officer candidate schools, corporate management programs. And so they put a heavy emphasis on skill. And so that is where that theory comes from. But once again, it's not foolproof.
Right. And this really argues that preparing someone for an entry level position, they've got to really answer the question of the technical skill, right? And so at the lower levels of any hierarchy, you are examining them for their technical skill. The higher one goes in the organization, they go from technical competence to conceptual competence. And that's why
Yeah.
the testing process is so different. There are more scenarios that test the concepts than the actual technical application. Here's an interesting thing that I always found super cool is looking at the U.S. Marine Corps Commandant's reading list. And what the commandants have done over the generations is they have a reading list for private, corporal, lance corporal, sergeant, lieutenant. It goes on up through the hierarchy. And there's an argument that the higher ranks, they have to read all the books and really digest them and conceive of how they would apply those books throughout their career, right? But if you're testing for major, there's a presumption that you have read the books for the ranks below you. To examine a reading list like that is to examine something that shows and reflects this evolution from kind of this technical piece to the conceptual. So something like Ender's Game was a book that was read in the Marine Corps Commandant's reading list several years ago. And it talks about play and how we train in this childlike mind, all the way up through Diplomacy by Henry Kissinger, The Ugly American, Lawrence of Arabia. Those are the higher ranks kind of concept readings. And so the skills theory is saying, okay, you're built. So you build the technical expertise and then build this leadership competence by evolving through technical to conceptual. And okay, we could say that that's important in many functions, but a technical expert does not mean that they have the conceptual understanding and intellect that is a requirement at the higher spots in an organization.
But don't you think that's what we recognize and celebrate in our organizations? I mean, and this is where, isn't it the Peter principle that comes in, where we are only, as competent as our highest rank, or how does that go, where, our competency lives in this particular area, and then when we move up, that leadership competency decreases. I guess what I'm saying here is we seem to reward the technical skills in many organizations, is that you are really good at your job, therefore we are going to promote you. And then individual gets, yes, and then they get to that next level and they don't know how to lead people.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in a lot of places. I worked with someone who was an engineer, and I have a lot of engineers in my family. I just find them so fascinating, the way they see the world, whatever type of engineering. I just love their brains. Some engineers are not good at people, but they're really good at the engineering function. And that's where I think we say, okay, there's the technical expertise matters, kind of that entry level first line supervisor. And then it starts kind of becoming this conceptual that is most important. So, okay, so segment one was trait theory. We got that. And then skills theory. And then where do we go from there in terms of the history and evolution?
I just want to pull on one thing here before we move on to the observed
I'm not bagging
leader.
on engineers.
This is what the thread I want to pull on is, do you think that there are some assessments that are valid, that can be given to an individual? Because here's what I've learned, but it's unfortunately the hard way a lot of times, is that some people should be in charge of things and some people should be in charge of people. And you just brought up, like perhaps the mind of an engineer, and we're kind of generalizing, an engineer. Yeah. But what you're saying is that there are some technical skills there, like that of an accountant, or someone who thinks very linear, who is very left brain logic minded, and they are super good at their job. And then you put them in charge of people, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that their competency level lies here. But how do we find that out? Because unfortunately, I've had to find that out the hard way when someone gets promoted and we're like, ooh, they're not doing a very good job, with the human process of leadership. So I don't know. And I guess it's just, it's hard. You can probably gauge it from someone who is already in your organization, but coming from the outside in, I think it might be a little more difficult to gauge.
Yeah, and I guess I just have such a hard time with those absolutes.
Yeah.
Good at stuff and good at people.
Yeah.
I really reject the idea that it's an or this binary proposition. And I love me some ampersand. So I think you can be good at both, but there is a kind of a natural dissolving of technical expertise as one moves up an organization and becomes more conceptual. I would argue you and I could probably go out and grab someone and search them and handcuff them because we've done it so many times, but we will not. We will be using an old technical proficiency, and there may be a new way of performing that same skill. Um, and it would be perhaps as uncomfortable for us to do that as it would be for one of our line folks to come up into really evaluating strategy for the organization and doing some of the more conceptual work. I guess I'm going to say that my pushback on that is I don't think it's an either or.
Hmm.
There are people that are better at one than another, just as like I'm more essence than detail at this point in my life. I cannot edit my own work. I absolutely suck. And so I've kind of grown out of being really technically proficient at the detail work, and now I'm more essence. And I think that's a natural evolution. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And yeah, most definitely we don't want to put people in boxes, but there have been people, and their faces are flashing in my head right now, of those people who it is an and. It's or I'm sorry, it's not an and. It is an or, where
Okay, sure.
putting people in charge of people was just putting this person in charge of people was a terrible thing. But I agree with you. I think it's more nuanced, and I kind of reject the notion that that is the mean. I don't think it is. But
Yeah.
okay, so we can move on. Sorry, I didn't want to, I just was thinking about that. But then the next is the observed leader, and that is behavioral theory. And remember, these have all been evolutions of leadership theories by really smart people who have studied this. And this one is from Ohio State's Two Dimensions, is about the consideration is, do you care about your people? And initiation of structure. And do you organize the work independent of each other? And you can be high on both, you can be low on both, or any mix of it.
Can you be high task, high people? I mean, we've all seen this framework in basic management school. Again, I think the astute leader has a fluidity to them, and there are times where you have to be high task or high organization, and and there are times where you have to be high people. I think the astute leader, many listeners would argue that the astute leader has a fluidity and agility to them that flows with the mission and the necessity of the people to carry out the mission. And we can be in front of people, high people, and really strong at people. And behind the scenes, when we're the workhorse instead of the show horse, we can be high in task. And that task then helps us fulfill the mission and more readily connect with people. Again, I mean, you're going to hear this thing where I just reject this binary kind of you could or. I think you have to be, and if we're going to argue for anything in any of this history, it's like the fluidity and necessity of the people that carry out the work, the organization that has to be strong and solid for the work. So I don't know.
This makes me think about all of the characteristics and putting people in these boxes of are you an autocratic leader, are you a collaborative leader, are you a laissez-faire leader? And the answer is yes, depending on the situation.
Totally.
And we can think about that adaptability in situations where, when the defecation is hitting the oscillation, we are not being collaborative. Like, what should we do now, everyone? Let's get some feedback and some input, and I'll weigh out everyone's opinions. It's not like that at all. That's where we fall to the level of our training, and we just do the thing. But I do talk with a lot of leaders, especially after my keynotes, that reject the notion that in times of peace, when we do have time, that gathering feedback is a waste of time for them. And I've had some leaders say to me almost these exact words as, I don't have time to explain the why behind the do. And my rebuttal is, yes, you do. You're not that important. And if you want to get buy-in in your organization, you really do need to bring people to the table when you make a decision, those who it affects in your organization, you should bring them to the table. So you do have time for that. You just choose not to, because that is the because I said so theory. And I'm too busy to have to tell everyone, when the research shows that when all of us, what we want is for someone to look at us and say, here's a new policy that's coming out, but I want to let you know why. Because what happens is most people scratch their heads and go, where the hell did this come from? Why did this new policy or this new rule effective immediately come down? Because they haven't bothered to take the time. And yet when a leader says, I want to offer this to you, here is the why behind this. You may not agree with it, but what they found in the research shows is that most people will say, okay, I may not like it, but I respect where you came from in coming to this idea or this conclusion and this decision. So it's again, I push back really hard on those people. They're like, I don't have time. I make decisions and people do them.
Yeah, and you know what's so funny? I have this burning question for you. How many times have you tested either for promotion or whatever, and they say, describe your leadership style?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, describe the situation and I'll tell you my leadership style.
Really? That's what you said? So you avoided the trap. Some people will go right in and say, well, this is my leadership style. And really what you've just demonstrated, this astute agility and flexibility for the mission. It's like, look, I'm Kristen Zeman, and you give me a scenario, I'll describe my leadership style. How many times have you heard someone describe their leadership style and then stick to it as if it's what they're supposed to say, supposed to do? And it doesn't work for every situation, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. Okay, what would be the canned answer in an interview question like that? Is tell me your leadership style.
I'm a situational leader. And then I would cite it. I mean, it just makes me
Well,
barf in my
most
mouth.
people, well, yeah, most people will say,
Or they'd say, I'm a
honestly,
servant leader.
yes, or I'm a collaborative servant leader. And that's just, those are just word salads, because is anybody going to sit in an interview and go, you know what? I am an autocratic Machiavellian leader who honestly is drunk on power. No, said no one ever. You're going to say all the right things and you're going to say all the right buzzwords. I'm a servant leader. It's word salads.
Right. And I think what we recognize is we're giving permission for listeners to say, okay, how would I answer that? And what is my true response, right? How do I show up? And if they don't show up in this kind of flexible way that the mission drives the way that they lead, I don't know. It might just be a nudge for them to kind of examine how they show up. So you can be really good at people and good at tasks. That's what you're arguing.
Yes, I think that you can be both, as they say, a manager. Are you a manager or a leader? You can be both. And that's to your point. We both come to the same conclusions,
Kristen,
because we are not linear.
I once took the bait, warrior or guardian. I was like, I took the bait and I want to stab myself in the eye with a fork because I took the bait and I was pressed to take the bait. And I know better. Because I know better. And really, I think one of the urgings in this for the folks that listen is really consider this. Speak your truth, examine yourself, prepare for those kinds of questions where you're given a this or that, and get ready for that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And be honest about, and about really
or not
what your trade or
lie your
ass off.
If you're an asshole, don't tell them I'm a complete asshole. Like,
good point. Good point.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. I'm a power hungry Machiavellian leader and you should promote me. Yeah. Okay. So what do you say about the idea that these theories don't matter at all. And this is where a professor declares himself a leader, and he sits in front of a row of empty chairs. He lines up the chairs, he barks orders, he says, "Chairs, follow me," and nothing happens. He lectures them, still nothing. So you can call yourself a leader all day, but until someone decides to follow you, you're just a person yelling at furniture. No?
And you're a complete wackadoodle. And probably
So
a
there is a
pickleballer. You
theory.
think that professor plays pickleball?
Probably not. But by this notion is
Right.
that these theories don't matter at all because it is the follower that determines if you are a leader.
Yep.
And sometimes that makes my head explode because then people will say, "Oh, and I just had this interaction. Someone emailed me to talk about leadership and said, people like Napoleon and Stalin and Hitler, they were great leaders, and they were kind of looking for me to become agitated about that." And the answer is there were most definitely followers. Now, do I subscribe to the alignment of their virtues, their principles, their integrity? No, of course not. But one cannot argue that they did not have followers. They did.
Right. So followers don't make someone a leader.
It doesn't.
Well, does it? I would
Just because
say,
you disagree with the leadership that they're taking you down, but they're still, how can you say that you're not a leader if you have followers? I mean, the most corrupt
right, because
individuals, present day, have a lot of followers.
they do. And so I've just overlaid all of that with my values. That it has to
Right.
add value to the greater good. It has to make the lives of other people better. It has to put the needs of the masses before self. So,
Yeah.
I just overlaid this whole thing with my values. And I would say you're a person who can assemble and can get folks kind of thinking about carrying out work. But I don't know. I'm really going to have to chew on this because I think leadership, if we are to value it, if we are to study it, if we are to encourage it, has to be for a, a cause that adds positive value to the world.
Yeah, but
I'm just
that's
going to be
your
judgy about it.
Yeah, that's your definition. And just so you know, I'm pushing back only because for the sake of being a contrarian here. But I mean, we don't have to look very far to look at a leader who is I would say objectively a selfish leader with the best interests in mind,
With
of
self-enrichment. Yeah.
self-enrichment, right. And yet still has followers. And so you're absolutely right. It doesn't align with my values whatsoever. There is absolutely no respect for an individual like that. But gosh, I don't know if we could argue
So,
that is not a leader. So I'm just saying.
well, some people, especially in 2020, argued that we weren't leaders because we were leading an organization or organizations that should not exist, that police should not exist. And we were seen as those societal actors that were not necessary, that actually led organizations that had no noble intent. That was the
Ah,
view of some people.
yeah,
So
yeah.
some of the assignment of the title leader comes from the person who's assigning it. And it's not
Ooh.
without judgment and not without an overlay of character, principles, values of the individual that's either assigning or removing the title.
So that's interesting. And you actually just teed us up for the next segment, which really bringing it full circle here with the United States of America and its 250th anniversary, we continue to succeed, to prevail, to outlast despite leadership. And I will tell you, I have been told many times that, listen, head of the organization comes in, and honestly, it doesn't matter to us. And this is from a worker bee perspective. We don't care who the leader of the organization is, because we have enough systems and processes in place that we will still persist. We will still have legacy. This isn't going anywhere despite who is sitting at the top. So there is an argument here that maybe it's not the leader at all, and that leadership isn't a thing a person has. It's something that a group does together, regardless of whose name is on the door, like a symphony or a jazz band with no conductor. What do you think about that? Is that the leader doesn't matter at all?
I would say the leader does matter. I think what that statement kind of offers is that the outcome and the path toward the outcome should be distinguished. Just like, well, I'm not sure I can give a good example. I could say that some democracies, some organizations prevail even without sound leadership, because the group bands together to strengthen the organization. You and I have both known organizations where the CEO, the chief, the person in the highest position, well, we could say leadership, we'd say authority. And maybe that's where what we have to talk about is this distinguishing piece between authority and title and leadership. I would argue that they are very different. And what an amazing thing when the person who has the requisite authority is also the person that has the most leadership in the organization. That is a place where an organization can thrive. They are a leader with followers. They are strategic, they're conceptual, they have demonstrated the technical proficiency, they've demonstrated the human capacity and competency. They have the conceptual competency. They have all that competency, and they have the requisite authority, as they are very different. Leadership and authority are different, and it is a strong, thriving piece to have both in the same individual. So I think we have to separate these two.
I think you hit on something really big there, leadership and authority, because you can most certainly have the authority, but not have the respect of your people, i.e. leadership. But I think there's a word missing here, is that, and you can also bring this right back to policing and the movement that, the abolish the police movement, defund the police movement, is that there is most certainly authority when it comes to policing, but is there legitimacy? And when there is a lack of legitimacy, which is another word for trust. And so that is what I think that we're hitting on here, is that, yes, most definitely you can be in the position of the king, of the top of the organizational chart, of the president of the United States, and you can have the formal leadership and the authority. But do you have legitimacy from the people that respect you? So I think that's something really big. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, well, and you're talking to really underscore your point, that you're saying that leadership isn't something that a person has, it's something the group does in response to. And they do it together in response to recognizing something that has to be done, a mission to be accomplished,
yes,
an act of service to be completed. Right. So, I mean, I think that's really the landing spot for the solid bunny. And
I agree.
That really argues for this notion that one that has the traits, that has the desire, that has the technical proficiency, connects with humans, has this conceptual piece, they are the people that really get the group to carry out the work. And you hit on that strongly, and it's a compelling piece for one to examine themselves, right?
Yeah, but you said something also that made me think, is that, we do need leadership. And it kind of brings me back to my metaphor. And I don't know if this is a great metaphor, but just back to the jazz band or, to the symphony, is that, everyone of course has their role, that, they know what to do. They have the instrument that they play. But what if we can't agree on the same sheet of music? And so sometimes we do need that guidance of a leader to say, hey, here are the scores that we will be playing today, because sometimes left to our own devices, there are too many cooks in the kitchen, and you do need that leader, to your point, who is in perfect alignment with the mission, the values, the goals of the organization. And, a goal can be, a team goal to win. The goal can be whatever your mission is for your organization. It is the leader's job to make sure that we're in alignment. So to me, a leader not only gets work done through others, but they also bring up give them the capacity, the competency. That's what people want. They want mastery in their jobs. And so the way I see my job as a leader is to make sure we are in consistent alignment with the mission and the vision and the values, and ampersand, and to give you, the followers, the skills and the tools to be able to carry out that mission. That's my job, to remove those barriers. And so just kind of tying that in a bow, which is exactly what you say. There's no crowned winner. This knowledge just stacks, all of it.
Right. And I would say I've seen it 100 times, as have you, is that you can be all of that. And if you can't speak in front of a group of people and connect with them,
Yeah.
and to really stand before people and reflect the professionalism and the goodness of the work, it's not going to go well if you can't convey a message. So I think there's a lot of that. The encouraging piece is for folks to really look at this evolution with trait theory, skills theory, behavioral theory, and then leadership as practice in this history and evolution of leadership, and to examine self and where they want to commit in this next period of time. I think I described to you, I pulled out the Marine Corps leadership traits and principles, right? And that JJ did tie buckle as kind of the key: justice, judgment, decisiveness, and it goes beyond. And I would examine it in periods of time and say, okay, where do I need to focus? Where do I need to strengthen? And often it was something like tact, right? Ooh, I'm a little light on tact because of whatever reason. And I'm going to focus and have this intention around showing up in this way to be more tactful. And I think the urging is to examine self, to examine the history, examine leadership as practice in this jazz and symphony kind of way that you've described. And for leaders, no matter where they are in an organization, how much authority they have in their organization, to demonstrate that which gets the group to carry out the work without even maybe the attribution that they led the effort.
And that's a big one
Right?
too, right? Not taking the credit, for sure.
Yeah.
So these four theories, one line recaps on these four theories. The first one is who. The second is what you build. The third is what you do. And then the fourth is what we do together. And none of these four theories address the gap between seeing a problem and deciding to act on it. Of course, that's a future episode, but they most certainly build upon each other. And you're right, there's no one right answer. So I think that's where we've landed, is that, especially a good leadership has to have that adaptability. That's kind of our takeaway, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And the hope is that Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast, that what we bring folks might just be more questions than answers, and might create more work for them. It's kind of what we're doing here, creating more work for folks.
Hey, we're not spoon feeding. We're not spoon feeding anybody. This is hard work that we're doing here.
Hell
There's
yeah.
no easy answers.
Our sponsors demand this.
That's right. If you leave here with more questions than answers, if you leave here more confused, then
you're
we have done our job.
You're welcome.
Happy
awesome.
250th anniversary to the United States of America. Don't light off.
Happy birthday, USA.
Hey, listen, everybody. If you love what we're doing, show us some love. Just subscribe, like it, review, spread the word about the Hollow Bunny podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. This podcast was produced by the incomparable Ted Madden. And listen, if you don't like it, move along. There's nothing more to see here, but just remember, friends, Keep filling your own buddy and keep adding substance to others. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
When you look inside, what do you find? Are you content to fall behind? When you lose your way and you've lost your why, have courage and get ready to fight the hollow buddy. When the way ahead is covered in smoke and you're tired and you're scared and you're losing hope, you'll open your heart and your eyes to see a challenge and a question. Why not me? To fight the hollow buddy. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow buddy. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all, and I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger, failing forward and moving onward, doing the hard thing and the right thing, forever fighting the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow buddy. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. You're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. The monster